So welcome everyone to AIM Boston Chapter's first formal event. My name is York Lowe. I'm with John Hancock, and John Hancock is very proud to support any effort that promotes diversity and inclusion within the asset management industry. And certainly AIM, which has been founded since 2006, has been at the forefront in terms of promoting the presence of Asian Americans in the investment management industry, whether it's public markets or private markets. It's really the whole ecosystem, and that's what really excites me about supporting AIM. And I think today's panel is very, interesting. We have three very excellent speakers, including our own co-chair, Brenda Chia, who is definitely an excellent business development professional in the industry. And also, of course, Chris Wong and John Kim. So I personally know Chris Wong because he, is the head of financial institutions for Janus Henderson, which is a firm that we do business with. He has been with the firm for over 19 years, really covering large, insurance companies and other banking institutions. And before that, he has many years working for Principal in Unum, in Asia, US, Latin America. He is a CFA charter holder, and he also had an MBA from Pepperdine. And so without further ado, I also actually want to pass it on to the co-chair of AIM Boston Chapter, Charles Ha, to say a few words. And I think this is a great event for the AAPI Heritage Month, and look forward to seeing you. And definitely, if you have not already, join AIM. I think it's a great, worthwhile organization. So I'll pass it on to Charles.
Thanks, York. Hi, everyone. My name is Charles. I'm currently a VP at TA Associates here in Boston. And it's my pleasure to introduce one of our panelists today, John Kim. John and I have gotten the opportunity to know each other over the last few years. As prior to TA, I worked at General Catalyst, and John quickly became a mentor of mine who I've definitely cherished and been incredibly thankful is a part of my life and a part of my career over these last few years. It's definitely been a privilege to get to know John. So John, he received his BA from Brown University and also has an MBA from HBS. John has spent his entire career dedicated towards investor relations. I would say that, he began, really focusing on kind of the private equity industry in terms of fundraising at Court Square Capital, where he was a partner. He left there in 2014 and then joined Kelso, another private equity firm in New York, where he spent 6 years up until 2019, where he joined General Catalyst. And so over the last 2 years, John has raised actually billions of dollars for General Catalyst, most recently in the form of 3 funds totaling $2.3 billion last year. And since then, he's also raised quite a few other vehicles for the firm, including a handful of SPACs as well. And so it's my privilege to intro John, and Brenda, I'll give it off to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, York and Charles. It's great to see you on this Thursday before a long weekend. Special thanks to John Hancock and York for sponsoring the Boston chapter. We're grateful for the support, not only of your time, but of the resources. For those of you who have been to AIM events, you probably know who I am, so I'll just do a quick introduction. I am the current board co-chair of AIM along with Sanjiv Shah of HarborVest. AIM is 15 years old this year, and we're very proud of the work that we do in supporting Asian Americans in the investment business with networking, growing their careers, as well as success in the industry. A little bit about myself. I grew up in Singapore and I came over to Boston to attend HBS. Post HBS, I've done a couple of different things. I've spent a little bit of time in consulting. And I've done 2 successful startups that were, created and sold shortly after business school. And now I work in venture capital. I lead Paladin Capital Group's capital development efforts with new LPs. Paladin, if you've never heard of the firm, is a leading venture investor in cybersecurity as well as deep tech. So it's a very, very hot space. We started a fundraise during the pandemic last year, and it has been a very interesting experience, to say the least. And if we have time, we'll touch on that after the panel discussion. A message to everyone who's on this, thank you for joining us. There is, if you look at the bottom of your screen, there is a Q&A button down there. So feel free to ask questions as this proceeds, and we'll try to get to them towards the end. So if we can bring up Chris and John, it would be terrific. We'll start this conversation. All right, here we are. So good to see everyone. So before we get started, John and Chris, what is a secret talent you have that you can tell this group?
Well, I think the secret talent I have is really having no talent, I guess. It's in the sense that I've never considered myself great at any one thing, but I'm pretty good at a lot of things, which I think has been a pretty handy thing in my sales career. It's just being able to, I'm a pretty good skier, so I can always ski with clients. I can make it down anything, but I'm not the greatest skier in the world. I'm a pretty good golfer, but I'm not the greatest golfer in the world. So I can mix with a lot of people. I can mix in a lot of situations. And I don't know, in some ways, I've always found that to be, being a jack of all trades and a master of none has actually been a benefit in some ways to me.
So let's just say to be determined, Chris. We'll come back to you in a couple of years and get your answer.
If I haven't determined it by now, it's not going to happen.
John, I see a guitar in your background.
Well, my secret sort of stupid human trick is actually I can cure hiccups by triggering resonance or triggering parasympathetic nervous activation in people. I spent years and years studying heart rate variability to actually control. It's become quite a famous technique for actually controlling stress and controlling your heart rate. It's a similar training that a lot of soldiers will go through or actually athletes will go through in order to keep their heart rate in a certain zone. And so I've just done so much practice with it. Actually, when I am with somebody, if they've got the hiccups, I can actually move myself into parasympathetic nervous activation versus sympathetic. So sympathetic is fight or flight, parasympathetic is rest and digest. And like metronomes, if you put metronomes on a desk, they'll all end up being in the same page.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
if I'm with somebody and I can grab a hold of their hand or their arm, I can actually actually thousands of times over the past decade, I've been able to actually cure hiccups. And maybe 1 out of 1,000 I've not been able to do.
But maybe that's also the secret of getting money out of LPs. It's the same, sympathetic nerve.
Yeah. I think that I do it less for the control of the meeting, more just control myself.
Great, thank you. I thought, in order to set a baseline for our audience, it would be helpful to kind of understand the differences in terms of the private fund world, which is where John and I are, versus the public markets where Chris is, to understand a little bit about the investor bases that we approach, the timelines for which we were working with these investors, churn in the investor base, etc. So let's start with Chris. Okay, tell us a little bit about the typical investor base you go after and the timeline that you're working under in order to secure the capital.
Sure, yeah. So I head our U.S. Financial Institutions Group which is Janus Henderson. And for those of you who don't know them, Janus was formed about 40 years ago, based in Denver, Colorado, where our U.S. headquarters still is. We merged with Henderson Global Investors in London. They're an 80-year-old firm in 2017, so we're now Janus Henderson. And our financial institutions team works primarily with big U.S. life insurers. And those life insurers are, names like John Hancock, where York works, AIG, Nationwide, Lincoln, a lot of household names. And these tend to have in common several things. They are either big retirement plan record keepers, like John Hancock, where Hancock's a leader in the 401k space, for example. They write variable annuities or have private branded mutual funds, like also Hancock's in that business, where sub-advise out and are looking for managers for different asset classes. They might have proprietary capital, their balance sheet money that I know you two probably go after on occasion. We'll be looking typically for big fixed income mandates in those areas, but also niche equity mandates or alternatives mandates there. And then a lot of these firms also have wealth management groups, armies of advisors like Lincoln Financial or New York Life, where they're selling retail products, and they have fund platforms where they'll put 40 Act mutual funds on or ETFs to sell to their retail clients through those financial advisors. And so each of those sales is a little bit different, but we're trying to raise money in all of those avenues. I would say the most common way for us is in kind of the just search and replace sort of mode, where say a large insurance company like a John Hancock, which manages billions of dollars and outsources billions of dollars to large asset managers, might be searching for an international core kind of mandate. And they will go through a database. There's a big database called eVestment, or you go to Morningstar, for example, and you could search the world and figure out who you want to narrow your search to. And typically they might interview 14 managers, kind of get the high level, and then narrow it down to 3 or 4 who they'll send an RFP to, will respond, and their presentations and so forth. But it depends. I've seen these things be a very short shot clock where they'll try to move money within a month. Sometimes it's a multi-year process. The good news is, I would say on average, they're pretty slow to move in terms of making decisions, but they're also slow to leave. So they tend to be fairly patient investors over time. The average mandate in our pocket of the industry is about $400 million. I would say the average timeline to getting something done is 6 to 8 months. And it's probably on the books on average of 5 or 6 years in our world. Does that answer what you're looking for, Brenda?
No, that's terrific. John, I'm going to ask you to paint the contrast picture in the private fund space.
Yeah, on the private fund space, it's really the big piece that's different is there's no liquidity. And when somebody makes a commitment to a private fund vehicle, they're making a commitment for some period of time. Now, you can sell that commitment to somebody else, but at the end of the day, you can't redeem and just get your cash back. And so when you think about it, what really is that all sales, all marketing involves some indexing of trust. And that can't be avoided. When you think about what it is when you're selling a blind pool of assets that you don't have any liquidity, the indexing of trust actually is much, much higher in terms of what's actually going to motivate a decision to invest. And so to build trust, you have to campaign and describe a track record or a differentiation. And you divide all that track record plus differentiation divided by how complicated your story is. And by the way, this is very true for politicians as it is for private equity fundraisers, where the function or the ability to actually get elected and or to raise money is really a function of, at least in my felt experience, your track record plus your differentiation divided by how complicated your story is. And so in politics, you would call that your voting record divided by your differentiation, how charismatic you are or are not, how much you actually stand for some part of something that people want, divided by complications of your story, which can often be scandal. It can be something that just didn't work right in your experience. And private equity is very much the same thing. I've seen many organizations that have been able to raise a lot of money despite the fact that their track record is pretty pedestrian because they're quite differentiated. And that's not a sense of being marketeering, but like you could be a distressed manager and say, look, I'm an exquisite distress manager. We've had 10 years of a bull market, but if I'm quite differentiated in distress, I can have a pretty average track record, relatively speaking, and still attract a lot of money. And it blows it all up if you actually do things that will actually go against the felt experience of trust. And that can be, again, in private equity, that can be scandal, headline risk, departures. It can be something that actually people say, that didn't feel so good. By the way, increasingly, and I know we're talking to AAAIM, increasingly that complication can be lack of diversity. And that can be a real problem as well. So that's, I think, a little bit of the difference. And we index higher on having to get over that trust hurdle because there's no liquidity.
Right. And I like to say that in the private markets, the relationships with LPs last longer than a lot of marriages. I mean, we better be sure, if you invest in a GP that, that is the GP that you want. So what I'm hearing from the both of you is potentially that in the private markets, there may be a smaller pool, a smaller actual number, discrete number of investors, of LPs in a fund, but it's much deeper relationships versus, where Chris sits, where it's potentially a wider pool of LPs, wider pool of investors, but with, shorter timelines and maybe a little bit more churn, as Chris said, the replacement index that takes place, when there's a new search or new strategies that, investors want to go into. So is that a fair characterization, very broadly, of the two different types of asset classes?
Yeah, it might be. I mean, I don't know your side, your part of the world well enough to know if that's what the differentiating point is. I mean, our relationships go back a long way. I mean, our oldest portfolios are 25 years. We go back with some of these relationships back to the 80s. So the relationships can be old, but with liquid public active management, it's hard to return and have sustainable returns for long, long periods of time, right? We know that's true. That being the case, you're eventually going to get fired. You hopefully hold on to it for a long time. You give your portfolio manager time to change, but the relationship continues. So I might get terminated off of a large cap growth mandate, but hope I get hired on to something else later.
On something else.
The goal with all of these clients is that we want to have 2 to 3 to 4 mandates in place. So we're terminated off something, but we still have a relationship. And then hopefully the one we get terminated off of, we're replacing within the next 2 or 3 years. But it very much is we talk about I'm not sure if in the private world, you talk about the 4 Ps, people, process, philosophy. We talk about partnership as well as a P. As a P. Partnership is something the industry, at least on our side of the world, we take very seriously in terms of for service, partnering for performance, partnering for brand, and partnering to help our clients build their business, because they grow assets, we grow assets. Our flows are a function of their. So if we are included in John Hancock's retirement plan platform, the more they sell, the more they bring in, we get a small slice of that. So we have a large devotion of resources to our clients to help them sell, actually. Intellectual capital, value add programs. Our retail wholesalers are partnering with their retail wholesalers out on the street, trying to raise capital, where it's from individual participants.
Thank you. Are we seeing any convergence in the public and private markets? We mentioned SPACs earlier, John. I mean, are we seeing these two asset classes grow closer together? And what does that mean in terms of, the sort of relationships that each side goes after?
Sure. We are, we aren't, right? That's not a great answer, but let's take the public markets specifically at large, and then we can talk about the SPAC market. Ultimately, to be a private market investor is very different than being a public market investor because of the lack of liquidity, and because oftentimes, if you actually articulate what's going on in the private markets, the public markets exist so they can actually predict changes in value. There are some activist funds that exist for sure, but by and large, you are trying to predict changes in value. The alternatives market, you are by and large trying to create changes in value. And so those are two different mentalities. Appreciate even the operating systems of these organizations are very, very different. That if I sort of describe the ego operating system of somebody who's a public market investor, they are trying to make sure that they make the right investment decisions, but they actually, one of the greatest skills they have to have, they need to know when to tap out. Like, oh gosh, I'm long in public security, or I want to go short in public security, and I need to know when I'm wrong so I can change my mind very quickly. And that's something that in the private market is unavailable to you. And so in the private market, you have to have, not for every category, but you have to have an ego operating system of control. Like I have to say, look, I am actually in control of my own destiny here. And that, again, that's writ large. That's not every asset class, particularly it's not venture where I'm at today, where you have no control because you're always a minority investor. Back to the public markets coming in, you're seeing where you're seeing it happen. Where you're seeing it happen is that there seems to be, right or wrong, and I'm not an expert in this, there seems to be an enormous arbitrage between what's going on in the innovation market. Innovation is those investments that are actually changing the nature of what is going on in the status quo, telehealth, teleeducation, mobile security, et cetera. And they're growing at massive rates because they're actually changing the way businesses work. And that's happening, particularly in the post-COVID environment. And what you're seeing is the public markets then either through hedge funds saying, I'm going to start actually just spraying and praying and put as much money out into this asset class as I can, And that's not a convergence, but that is happening. And then the SPAC
Right.
market saying, hey, look, let me see if I can hack into this and create a off-ramp to the IPO market that allows us to actually take
Exactly.
advantage of this.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it's working.
those trends
because-
you're referring to can't be ignored in our market either. I mean, we've invested in SPACs. We have privates in many of our portfolios because we realize there are returns to be gained there, right? There's innovation, there's disruption occurring. And if we want to participate in that, we have to participate in the private markets. Now, most of our funds have a constraint. They can't take big positions in privates, right? Because most of the fund has to be liquid, but we do want to play in those areas.
And I'll throw out one more for the audience. What is different today is that the venture industry and business has figured out that they can keep these venture companies private for longer and make a lot more money. Before, there was a time where when you're a venture-backed company, in order to get to scale, you had to go buy data centers, you had to go buy IT staff, sales forces. But because now you can rent almost everything, you can rent, it's called unscaling. You can actually rent the capacity from Amazon and you can scale. You don't have to buy software. You can rent it as software as a service. Now what happens, companies get out, and once they find product market fit, they get bigger and faster in the private markets for less capital than ever before. And that's why you're seeing these gigantic trends of innovation attracting all this capital, saying, oh my God, you don't need our capital. And so we got to get in before you actually get to the $100 billion level and $50 billion level.
Absolutely. No, I'm seeing that as well, in the work that we're doing. I want to pivot now. Thank you for, helping set the table in terms of, what's happening in both the private as well as the public markets. I want to now move on to the bamboo ceiling discussion. Last year, AIM did a research piece with Professor Josh Lerner at Harvard Business School, which essentially showed that, in the investment business, Asian Americans manage 0.7% of assets. That is a minuscule amount compared to, just for ease of comparison, we are 6% of the population in this country. And anecdotally, we see a lack of representation in Asian Americans as well in more senior roles, especially in IR. So I want to talk about this. This is the crux of today's conversation. There are some stereotypical characteristics that may lead us to believe that Asians are less suited to IR, but the two of you have been incredibly successful in what you do. So I thought it might be helpful to the audience to kind of peel the onion back a little bit to talk about the trajectory of your careers and how you ended up where you are today. Chris, you want to go first?
Sure, I can. Yeah, I don't know that any parent raises their child to be a salesperson, and probably least of all Asian parents, right? So,
right. Doctor, engineer,
right.
Lawyer.
And I'm not a Harvard grad like the two of you, so I went to University of Colorado Boulder. Good university, but not top tier by any sense. Not top 10, not top 20. And so those are the great jobs that are available to graduates from a school like the University of Colorado Boulder, or any big state university. Where you can go in, make a good living, get well trained, and have a lot of freedom. And that appealed to me. I was fortunate to land in an insurance company sales training program, Union Mutual. They don't really do too many of these anymore, but they would hire 25 young undergraduates every year, put you through a year-long rotation, and then give you a sales territory where you're able to go out and wholesale to advisors. So it was a chance to go to B2B at an early part of my career, make investment banker-like dollars when I wasn't able to get into investment banking because I didn't have great grades and didn't go to an Ivy League. But it was a good place to start and get well trained, which led me into kind of this part of the world. Insurance companies because they were big administrative companies administering hundreds of thousands of life insurance policies and medical insurance policies and so forth. They were first to the 401k market. So my company happened to be the first open architecture 401k plan that 401k provider. You could go out and your company could buy a 401k product and get Putnam funds and MFS funds and Goldman Sachs and Fidelity and everyone else, when everyone else at the time was doing proprietary funds. So it was kind of an innovative thing to do, but it got me going and investing and thinking about that. And so naturally I sort of stayed in that realm. I like the investment side of things better rather than the insurance side. And so now I sell to insurance companies rather than selling the insurance and retirement products. And that's how I kind of ended up here. But to your question about the bamboo ceiling, I think a lot of the attributes of being Asian have kind of helped in that regard, in the sense that when I go to a conference or I was calling on advisors back at the beginning of my career, I was always amazed at I'd be remembered. And part of why I was remembered was I was the only Asian ever calling on them, right? I mean, even today, I go to a conference of 400 people, I'm one of 2 or 3 Asians in the room. So there's some notoriety in that. There's some recognition. And then secondly, I think, certainly the myth of the model minority certainly has its pitfalls for everyone. But at the same time, some of the positive things that it carries with it, kind of this image of trustworthiness and reliability and hardworking kind of values within the different Asian races, I think sort of confers maybe some credibility I haven't earned yet. I like to think I'm all those things, but confers that upon me before I've even proven it. So that's what I have to say about that. I think it's been a positive overall.
Chris, can I ask you a question? Where
Sure.
did you grow up? Did you grow up in a predominantly Asian affirming environment, or did you grow up in a predominantly white environment?
Well, born in San Francisco, so there were plenty of Asians around, but we moved to Colorado when I was 8, and I was probably one of a handful of Asians in my neighborhood and through high school years. And so, yes, predominantly white society. And Denver is pretty slim on minorities at all, except for, it's grown differently as the city's grown. It's become a lot more diverse, but back then it wasn't.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So I'm gonna jam off of that hook. I grew up in Minnesota, sort of the same thing. And so, Brennan, one of the things that we talk about the bamboo ceiling, look, the math is the math, and we can get philosophical about critical race theory about this, but when we talk about sales, which is an interpersonal job, one of the basic, and this is a Dale Carnegieism, but I think it's right. It goes all the way back to Aristotle and his discussion of rhetoric, which is, I am like you, I like you. And those are the two sorts of, like, when you go to a Dale Carnegie class, which I've taken, you're taught, like, hey, when you want to sell to somebody, you're looking at, and persuasion is really about logos, ethos, and pathos, logic, your values, and your emotions. And logic is just the product, the logic of the product, the logic that you were describing. A lot of people can do that. That's just not hard to do. But it's the cultural divide of, I like you, I am like you. And those are the things that talk about the values and the emotions of, actually, do you respond to a salesperson? And all of us on this call, all of us in life, actually, will actually resonate with what Dale Carnegie said back, in the 50s. And I'll tell you, one of the things that you asked about the career, I got my career started at IBM as a salesperson. This is in the late 80s. And IBM has an exquisite sales training experience. So I could actually see people being trained as salespeople. Like, okay, you can actually train this. And Chris, I think you and I probably share this, is that if most of the decision makers are not Asian, which in this case, white, men generally, and this is throughout the arc of our careers probably, because I'm in my early 50s, and so by definition, even earlier on, it was far more dominated. The ability to grow up in Minnesota and actually have never been in an Asian affirming environment, having actually to adapted to the linguistic and the sort of cultural sort of magnetic north of white society, actually helps me as an Asian walk in and say, hey, look, yeah, I am Asian, but in the critical experience of sales, I've managed to create a persona that allows me to say, I like you, I am like you. And if you don't like them, if you don't like their society, if you don't like what they represent, if you bristle at them, you cannot actually, by definition, succeed in this role as a salesperson, because that's sort of foundational. So that's the bamboo ceiling in a little bit of a more of a bottoms up approach, in my opinion, that we're naturally not selected to be. Now, I'll stop with this. To the extent all of a sudden the world is run by Asian Americans, then boy, then a lot of Asian Americans should go into sales, because they'll be able to actually rep to. And by the way, I think that does work in technology sales. I actually do think that a lot of technology buyers tend to be Asian. CIOs, everything, like chief information officers, things like that.
Yeah. I have to think about, John, going off your point there, back in Asia, is it mainly Asian salespeople calling on Asian decision makers? Now you've given me a project to work on. I'm going to call up my friends in the LP businesses in Singapore and find out what's going on over there. But, my take on this is quite simple. Sure, there might be we think there might be some characteristics that might hold us back, but this is a very bottom line driven business, right? So if you're able to get your first sale, if you're able to close the first deal, you roll from there. And if you're able to bring money in, you point to the pile of money and say, I brought that in. Who's going to argue with, everything else that you do, legally, whether or not you're Asian? So I think, getting the first success, getting that first commitment is so key, right, in order to grow your business and yourself in the industry. So there is a question here. I'm going to work the questions in. There's a question from Donna, and I'm going to read that out because this is germane to the conversation here. As Asians are stereotyped as being quiet and hardworking, should Asians be trained to take on more extroverted persona in order to fit into the IR role and to understand the importance of likability in this business?
So I'll just jump in on that one. Whether we like it or not, you already do that. Whoever the question was, we all do that. We all have personas, every single one of us in the call, and we have multiple personas that actually we bring out because they serve us. I have a different persona with my wife as I do with my children, as I do with my clients, and I have a different persona today presenting than I would necessarily at a sales call. So the question isn't, do you need to have a persona that creates more likability? Of course, you have it already. The only question is that do you want to make it a place where you can actually make money from? Do you want to make that persona so powerful? And the thing I would actually advise is that we all have multiple personas. I didn't create this idea, by the way. This multiple persona idea is a psychological idea that's existed for a long, long time. But the real trick, if you ask somebody, say, hey, look, I have personas that I use to defend myself. And they're disconnected from me, but they exist. I have personas that actually are totally harmonious and connected deeply with myself that I actually use to create my own, whatever that is. If the persona that you have, that is your likability persona, which everybody has, their charm persona, if that persona is really well connected to you and you love yourself when you're exhibiting that persona, and that persona tends to, by the way, be successful for you, then this is a great career for you. If that persona is that persona that actually keeps people away from who you are, like I'm gonna put the charm on, I'm gonna brown nose these people so they don't actually bother me, so they don't tease me, so they don't torture me, then this is a terrible job. By the way, that's not an Asian comment. That's a comment to anybody who actually
to anyone, right? But John, you're talking about the authenticity, right? Being true to who you are, and not just put on a cloak. Now, Chris and I had a conversation 2 days ago where we talked about, in this business, you kind of have to reveal yourself a little bit anyway. So John, like I see in your background, I can read like certain things about your personality and your interests. So Chris, do you want to talk about this a little bit? There's a little bit of risk taking involved here in the whole relationship building aspect of this business.
Oh, sure. I mean, and John, you kind of talked about like having a persona. I would say, you said you have multiple personas, right? You roll them out for different kinds of people. I mean, I think I'm all about trying to find out who the individual I'm facing off is against, right? And how I'm going to connect to every individual that we do business with. And everyone's different. And I think you have to like that. Not just the persona that you're bringing out, but also the energy that it takes to get someone else to open up and share with you their likable part so that you enjoy working with them. I mean, everybody's I can think about clients who I find tough to deal with, but over the years, I've gotten them to reveal part of themselves that I really like. And although I may not like, I'm thinking about a particular person right now, this person day to day, I know part of this person that I really like. And that's the part that I can focus on. But it took, maybe several years to get him to peel back and show that part of himself. And we can relate on that level. So I think, and part of that is showing vulnerability. You have to show a little bit of yourself to get them to open up to you. right? To share a little bit of yourself. And I think that's something that maybe we as Asians aren't great at doing. You know, we're more, I don't want to make a gross generalization, but we would tend to be more private. We would tend to not be boisterous. We would tend to not talk about ourselves as much. I know I'm that way naturally, and it's taken some training for me to say, oh, no, you know, I have a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, and when I throw that out, people will start talking about their kids, and it's great to create connection out of. Start sharing personal interests. They'll start talking about their personal interests. So it's just a means of connecting, but it was a skill because my natural tendency would not be to show those things. But I've learned over the years that sharing some things really gets other people to share things about them. And I find I really like those things they share about themselves.
Great, thank you. So we have, you know, an interesting audience today. We have some people who have been in this business a while and some who are fairly new to this business. What are 1 or 2 pieces of advice you would give to someone trying to break into IR or trying to get a promotion up this ladder?
I'll take that. To break into IR, one of the things, and private market IR and public market IR are, I think, quite different. One of the things that if anybody wants to break into private markets IR, you really want to make sure you spend time understanding the language and the breadth of the job. Too many people look at this as a sales job, but it's quite heavily operational. You know, I cannot tell you how many people from hedge funds or investment banks say, oh, I like people, I'm good with people. And I've even raised money. And I smile and say, but have you run an advisory board? Have you run an annual meeting? Have you done a co-investment? Do you know how to do a capital call? Do you know how to do distribution? Can you do a portfolio review? Can you do branding? How are you at websites? And it's just a very different experience. And so anybody who wants to break into the business, make sure you understand the breadth of what this job is. Because when you then meet somebody and they say, okay, you really understand what you're doing, then that gives you a real leg up. For those who are in the industry, one of the things I always tell my folks in our team is simply this: they're evaluated every year, and this has been true for 20 years for me. Anybody who's worked for me, they would say, yeah, if I work for John Kim, this is the only thing he actually evaluates us on. Number 1, do you demonstrate that you live in the service of others? Number 2, when you walk in a room, do people say, I'm glad you're here? And that's actually it. Those are the only 2 things I ever evaluate people on. Because underneath that actually is the everything. To live in the service of others, you have to be committed to it, because this is a job. Doesn't matter if it's Chris's job or John Kim's job or Brenda's job. The amount of ego deprivation that exists in these jobs is profound. And if you don't wake up every morning saying, you know what, I actually live to help people. I live in I derive joy and satisfaction by being in the service of others. And that is a natural thing. I find it to be more as I get older. You can't teach it. Yeah, I think it's a natural thing. And you can use it to be a great teacher, to be a great preacher, to be a great doctor. And
Absolutely.
you can use it to be a great fundraiser. And so that's kind of the promotion. I find it to be really instructive in terms of how far people get in their fundraising careers.
Yeah, and to go back to that, you know, what I was saying earlier about getting to know the individuals on the other side of the table, John, I think it's a lot easier for me to feel the importance of being in service to those other people when I really care about them, when I know them, when I understand what they're trying to accomplish with their families, that this isn't just a job to them either, right? That I know them personally and I care about doing a great job for them, and I care about their careers too.
Which satisfies if you do that, then it ties in that I'm like you, I like you, and I'm glad you're here.
Right. But it's more than that, right? I mean, John, you're talking about, you know, if you have a pension fund as an LP, then you're thinking of the underlying pensioners and being able to generate the monthly payment that goes to them. So I think there is a lot of mission-oriented, if you let it, you know, mission-oriented angles to the IR job that people don't always talk about. If you're already in this, you know, cast your mind back maybe 15 years ago and you're trying to get ahead, you know, what, in this day and age, you know, what practical advice can you get to someone who's trying to get the next promotion, trying to like move up the ladder?
I would say one thing, and it's, I don't know if this is true on your side of the world, Brenda and John, but we deal with professional buyers, right? Professional investors, people like York, who look at the world of investment managers and choose amongst them on various criteria. And 20 years ago, I guess when I started doing this, I wasn't facing off against a lot of CFAs, or there's other designations, right? CIMAs and KAYAs. You know, in our world, I'm saying I think that's become sort of a ticket of entry, I suppose. For those of you who are maybe at that point in your career where you still have 15, 20 years and can make it pay off, put in the time for one of the designations, you know, put in the time to get the CFA, put in the time to get the CIMA, whatever it is. But the CFA is becoming something that increasingly I think is required on the research teams that I'm dealing with. And didn't used to exist on my side of the fence, but you know, we have 3 CFAs on my team, and pretty much going down the road, I think everyone we hire will have that designation.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't
So-
have a great comment on that side. On the alternative side, just so you guys know, I think that it's the trick to alternatives is not even being promoted within an organization. These organizations tend not to be that big. You know, Paladin's not that big. General
Yes.
Catalyst not that big, and we're one of the largest venture capital firms in the world right now.
Exactly.
It's far more catching a wave. You know, you
Mhm.
spend your entire career swimming out, and occasionally, if you're lucky, a wave comes, you turn your surfboard, turn it around, you surf it in. In other words, the growth of the industry, the growth of the actual general partner has far more of an impact on your success financially than your actual promotion within the firm. I mean, it's probably 1,000 to 1 in terms of how, like, I can get promoted at General Catalyst. I suppose it's not any place you go, General Catalyst, but if I get promoted within an organization, it won't matter as much as long as General Catalyst doubles its assets.
Right, exactly. No, that's a good way to look at it. Question from Jeff Moy, a mutual friend of ours, that relates to this conversation. Is the bamboo ceiling career, I guess, you know, characteristics different whether in a partnership, you know, like General Catalyst versus, you know, a large public company? Are there different ways to think about, you know, the bamboo ceiling or how to get ahead in either of those places?
Maybe more so to John's comment, I guess a lot of the firms that you all work for in the private market are smaller firms.
Yeah.
You know, large asset managers like Fidelity or BlackRock have tens of thousands of employees. We're a mid-sized manager with 2,000 employees, but navigating those politics, and there is a certain climbing the ladder, so to speak, that probably doesn't exist in your part of the industry.
Yeah, I think that's right. And Jeff, it's great to see you. I can't see you, Jeff, but
Jeff can see you.
yeah, I'm thrilled that you and I are both friends with him, because I think Jeff is absolutely simply one of the best individuals I've ever met in the alternative space, maybe in my life. He's a wonderful person.
All right, Jeff, you owe John and me a follow-up call after this, so I expect to hear from you.
That's great. That's great. Look, I do think that the bamboo ceiling is a very real thing within partnerships. I mean, and within partnerships, you know, it's not even the bamboo ceiling. It's everything, right? Like, if you just look at alternatives. I mean, there are no people of color running these shops. I mean, it's not just Asians. It's just no one. I mean, like, okay, you got Vista. Good for
Right,
them.
Clear Lake,
You had to
Vista.
start the company, right? And there are a few, like, if you start your own company, great, and congratulations. But I mean, the paucity of people of color, and by the way, and women. So this is, and by the way, God forbid you're an Asian woman. I mean, you've got statistically, they just don't exist. It's a fascinating thing. So I don't know if it's a bamboo ceiling partnership or not, but we'll just sort of say, hey, the data would suggest that there's something really fundamental going on. And we could talk about it at length, but that probably does drive more towards the critical race theory argument than it does anything else. And that's my own felt experience. Again, I don't call it racism, but there's absolutely an incumbency bias that exists in alternatives for sure.
It's also just a function of numbers too. When I think about how far could someone like me go in a firm like ours, since I'm like one of the only Asians at the firm, it's I should say that we have a Japanese asset manager that's 40 people in Japan. We have a number of employees in Singapore and Hong Kong. So we have plenty of Asian employees, but they're all in Asia.
Right.
Right. But so it's not really a function. It's more of a function of there aren't many of us that are seeking to go into those roles. It's just a function of numbers, right? If there were more people in the firm, there might be more that eventually rise to be CEO or chief investment officer or whatever.
But that's where, AIM plays a role. I think what we're seeing very early at AIM are the people who want to launch their own funds. They almost invariably pass through AIM. Our network is about 4,000 people. So we are aware of, people who have launched themselves out of their, top tier firms, who are in this process of raising funds, who are trying to break into IR. So if you get more involved at AIM, you're going to see this, stuff that is happening, emerging very, very early. Obviously, like any startup, not everything works, but some of the stuff actually comes through. Like, I don't know whether you've heard of One Rock, in New York. They have been a long-time supporter of AIM, and Tony Lee and his group has really, really grown their assets and their reputation in the industry. There's Altos. In the VC world, obviously, there are a lot of Asians, especially out in Silicon Valley. So that is, a different animal altogether. Now, I want to touch quickly on mentorship. Can you talk a little bit about what mentors you've had to date, and are you mentoring up and coming, the next generation in this business?
I'll let Chris take that, because Charles opened up the conversation saying I was one of his mentors, and he left to go to TA. So clearly I wasn't very, very, very powerful.
I'll talk to Charles after this.
Talk to Charles after that. Like, oh, he was a great mentor. Well, I was so great. What happened? No, I'm kidding.
Charles.
I was thrilled with Charles's move. It was a great move for him, and that was just a joke. So Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'd say in sort of a, in a larger corporate environment, public company environment like we are, sure, mentorship is part of the program, right? I mean, you are trained to have mentorship relationships, trained to seek mentors, trained to be a mentor. So we have two interns that are on our team right now. They're, 2-3 years out of undergrad, and part of the job is pulling them along and making sure they're able to successfully take their next step. At the same time, I've had plenty of managers, supervisors, bosses, and whatnot, whose door is always open to me and has been. So I think within a corporate structure where part of the goal is to develop people, that's a natural part of the organization.
Chris, can I ask you, when you think about your mentorship journey, how many of the people that you mentor are actually Asian?
Oh, in my career,
yeah.
Aside from family and friends.
Yeah, I mean, in the work environment specifically.
Yeah, but in the work environment, none, because there really aren't that many that exist.
But there are other Asians certainly at Janus. What prevents them from reaching out to you and saying, "Hey, you're a successful professional at Janus. Can you mentor me?" Like,
I would say that we have no Asians in distribution.
Okay. So that means
yeah, anywhere I can think of. We have plenty of Asians. They tend to be that we have IT
PMs.
Okay.
And how about on the PM side or research side?
None right now. We have in the past.
Okay.
None currently.
Okay.
Well, that says a lot right there.
I think Janus could. There's a diversity hole for Janus to fill. So everyone send your resumes to Chris.
Lots of Asians in Asia, but not in the US.
Yeah. Interesting. Do we want to talk a little bit about, how COVID has changed the jobs here? Like I mentioned in my introduction, Paladin is raising a fund through COVID. We'll be closing it sometime this summer. So it's been an interesting experience, especially bringing on board new investors, which is primarily what I do at Paladin. But how has, the COVID world changed what you do? And do you think some of the changes are here to stay, for better or for worse?
So I'll jump in quickly. It's radically changed the way we raise money. And I, honestly, and I won't go into it now, but I could spend 2 hours talking about how we've completely re-architected the way we go to market thanks to the Zoom environment. What I'll say simply is this: is that what we committed to at General Catalyst is this. There are two phrases that I use. And look, guys, when you cannot make contact with people, you better have freaking great content, and that's all there is to it. No more of this. Hey, let's do a Zoom discussion with you guys. Blah blah. Pretend that it's the same thing as being live. Like, no. If I'm going to do something, I better just bring the thunder when I have content, and I mean something really interesting about innovation, or somebody really interesting they want to meet, or because I need to make sure, when I mean content, it better be some really, really technically well-presented content that General Catalyst before would have just given you a deck or a presentation. Now we're giving you a full-fledged website that actually gives click-throughs and this and that, the navigation bar and video and all that, because you need to have great content. The flip side of it is that the definition, so that's just technology and just effort. The flip side of that is that when I'm talking to somebody, I better be ready to say, I have learned something that will help you understand the world around you. And now in venture, you can do that. That's a unique dividend of being in the venture market. There are other organizations that may be able to do that, like Janus actually could be able to do that too. I can imagine Chris saying, let me help you understand what's going on in the markets today. So in other words, help them understand the world around them. Every one of us can do that in some way or form. And that to me has been a big, big change.
And I wouldn't say it's been radical for us, as John describes. It's certainly been a change, right? But we're doing investment reviews online. We're maintaining relationships online. I think the hard part is, how do you create personal connection to people via this sort of environment? So I think we've gone out of our way to do personal things. I mean, aside from the traditional investment servicing and asset raising, it's building relationships. And so we've gone out of our way to do things that we might have done in person in terms of entertainment and kind of personal connection before, but now we're finding ways to do them virtually. So for example, we got the bartender at 11 Madison Park, Michelin-starred restaurant. He's a Michelin-starred bartender, evidently. He did a cocktail hour for us and a number of clients, one evening, stuff like that. We've got a pit master at a local barbecue joint here in Denver who does these rib workshops. And we bring clients together and we do these rib workshops. And
I got to invest with you just so I can get access to these rib works,
So these are things that are away from, kind of the real grind of investing and more about trying to build connection, because that's the hard part. And you talked about mentoring. How do you onboard a new employee during this time and feel part of the organization during these times? So that's been the challenge. So we're going out of our way to try to be more personal and do things that make it as face-to-face as possible without being face-to-face.
What's going to be interesting is to see how much LPs want to go back to the real world. Investors on the buy side go back to the real world. They may or may not want to, because I think that's going to be driving a lot of our activities in the medium term, right? Will they want to go to conferences? Will they want to go out to dinner? Definitely, if there's a RIP class, we're all there. But something that's a lot more prosaic, will they actually want to do things like that? I mean, what are you seeing? Are your investors starting to open up and do some of the things that they used to do before, or are they still kind of holding it pretty tight to their chest?
Chris?
I'd say we're starting to see signs. I've got my first conference scheduled in August. We've got the All-Star game coming to Denver in July. I'm thinking
nice.
A couple of local kind of clients to that. So, I think people are starting to be accepting of it. And I'd say since last summer, if I wanted to take someone outside and play golf or do something outdoors, that's certainly been on the table. So, outdoor coffee meetups, et cetera. I haven't gotten on a plane since March. And I'm someone who used to travel, 2-3 nights a week. Whether that comes back the way it was, I don't know. And if I can go to Boston and, I'd see 20 people in Boston in the course of 3 days, they might not be in the office anymore. So how am I going to see them? I don't know if that will continue. That remains to be seen.
John, do you want to weigh in on that?
We haven't seen that much change. A little. I've been on planes, but not much. I think also the challenge is, to the extent you have international investors, which we have, a third of our investment base is international. They're just locked down. I mean, the vaccine rollout anywhere, maybe with the exception of the UK and Israel, has been abysmal. And that's well documented. So no one's traveling. So very little of it so far. But will they return? I think of course they will. I think that the U.S. or the world will normalize around different work patterns now. Well, it'll take a while, but this is actually kind of it's a sort of social phenomenon, which will be at some point. You could see a world where, and I'm going to make it up, where Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday are live meetings, Thursday, Friday are Zoom meetings, and whole organizations are just going to move to it. Certainly in the summertime, it's going to But you know, or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday becomes your travel day. Monday, Friday becomes your Zoom days, and whole organizations are just going to coalesce around these rhythms, and how the rhythms actually sort of work out, I don't know, but there definitely will be a norm that gets developed by society.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, number of offices are reopening up, and I'm actually going to next week for the first time, next week, meet some of our new investors in New York City. I mean, we closed these LPs through Zoom, which was an interesting experience, but I'm finally going to meet them. And I think people are very excited to actually just go out for lunch with me. You know, it's it's good to have that, you know, that kind of energy, and for people to be excited to meet. We're almost out of time. Any last words from the two of you, Chris and John? Any last bits of advice for our audience here?
No, to just bring it full circles, I'd said, you know, nobody raises their child to be a salesperson, and probably the least of all Asian parents. And it's, you know, I'm going to kind of be the opposite. I have lots of friends whose children are kind of starting to get out of college now, looking for career advice. And I'm telling them, sales is a great place to go. Working with people is a great place to be, where you can kind of have a lot of freedom to run your own business under the auspices of a bigger flag, and you know, really serve people and end investors, and you know, really create some good in the world.
Terrific, thank you. John, last words here?
I probably echo what Chris had said, is that you know, if I could say or do one thing, you know, sales can be a prestigious position, you know, and I don't know why it tends not to be.
I'll tell you why. You know, there is an upcoming event, the next AIM virtual event. It's a virtual event on July 1st. It's audaciously titled, "So You Want to Be a CIO?" I'm saying without IR, there is no CIO, right? You guys would agree with me.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Chris and John, for your time as we slide into the long weekend. I hope you come back and engage with AIM going forward. In addition to the July 1st event, AIM is going to have an in-person national conference this year, September 15th and 16th in San Francisco, with a great turnout of institutional investors and LPs. So we're very much looking forward to that. There's going to be great networking, learning, deepening of relationships. The way I like to characterize the AIM national conferences is that it's like a family reunion, and all of a sudden the conference breaks out. So it's got that very warm, welcoming feel to everybody, not just the Asians. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Thank you to our panelists, to York and Charles for kicking us off. And I wish everyone a very great weekend and a great start to summer.
Great work,
Brenda.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.